I believe with all my heart that this country will have a renewal of respect for life, including for the unborn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lamborn, for your very, very fine statement. I'd like to yield now to Jean Schmidt, a gentlelady from Ohio, who I don't think there has been a single floor battle on the life issue that she has not been out in front speaking in defense of the unborn and their mothers.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for those kind words from my friend from New Jersey. You know, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about abortion, we think of this as a 40-year-old movement. We think about 1973 and Roe v. Wade, and that was the catalyst to move this movement forward. We think about people like Barbara and Jack Wilkie from Cincinnati, Ohio, pioneers and leaders who actually coined the phrase right to life. But, Mr. Speaker, we forget that this is not a 21st century issue. This is a centuries-old issue. You know, it was actually the suffragists, those women over 150 years ago, who talked about women's rights, the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to speak, the right to run for public office, that also talked about the right to life. To these women, the very concept of feminism demanded that the basic human rights be extended to everyone without exception, including the unborn. And feminism meant rejecting the use of force to control or destroy one another, particularly among the most vulnerable and defenseless of the population. So to suffragists, the act of abortion was much more than harm imposed on a woman and her child. It was a frontal assault on womanhood and feminism, and an insult to the cause of the philosophical underpinnings of their cause. And how do we know this? Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, all we have to do is to look at their writings. All we have to do is to look at people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony in the Revolution. They both wrote extensively about abortion, calling it infanticide and child murder. Susan B. Anthony also wrote, quote, "Guilty? Yes, no matter the motive, love of ease, or desire to save from suffering the unborn innocent. The woman is awfully guilty who commits abortion. It will burden her conscience in life. It will burden her soul in death." Victoria Woodhull, the first female candidate for president, stated similarly that, quote, "Every woman knows that if she were free, she would never bear an unwished for child, nor think of murdering one before its birth." And Sarah Norton, who first challenged Cornell University to admit women, also pondered whether there would ever come a time when, quote, "The right of the unborn to be born will not be denied or interfered with." And Alice Paul, we all remember Alice Paul, the author of the Equal Rights Amendment. Mr. Speaker, it may surprise you, she stated abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. You know, I could talk all night about this, but we have Women's History Month in March, and I hope that I can be invited back again to speak more on the history of women and the human rights pro-life movement, because it's not just about human rights for one individual, it's about human rights for all individuals, the unborn, the born, and the elderly. And so I thank my colleague from New Jersey for hosting this forum tonight. I really appreciate his leadership in the pro-life movement, and we're going to continue to forge ahead until everyone in America has the right to life. I yield back.
Thank you, my friend, for her statement and for her leadership. I'd like to now yield to Tim Huelskamp, who took the baton from Jerry Moran, who's gone on to the Senate, and thank him for joining us tonight. I look forward to his comments.
Thank you, Congressman, and I'd like to recognize the long-time efforts of Congressman Chris Smith in defending life. I've watched from afar for many years, and it's a real treasure for the opportunity to speak here tonight and join his efforts. And in my opinion, and opinion of many other Americans, one of the greatest tragedies in the history of our nation has been the direct death and the direct murder of more than 50 million Americans since 1973. Far too often, too many women, too many families turn to abortion as the only option when they discover they're unexpectedly pregnant. Situations exist that make the thought of being responsible perhaps for another life overwhelming, to say the least. But abortion is not the only option available to these women and to their families. My wife and I have had the joy and privilege of adopting 4 children. And 2 of those children are from the country of Haiti, and 2 of the others were already Americans. Incidentally, my oldest, when she was young, she didn't believe that babies arrived via stork. They arrived on airplanes, because our second 2 children were picked up at the airport. And that reminds me of another story. A 5-year-old, she said, "Daddy, can't we tell them to do adoption, not abortion?" Yes, we can, and that's the message I would like to make sure we share tonight, because supporting adoption is often the neglected, the unreported side of the pro-life coin. And if we're going to encourage women and families not to abort their babies, we need to offer alternatives. And all across this country, there are thousands upon thousands, perhaps tens and thousands of men and women that are adopting children, that are offering their services, particularly through local crisis pregnancy centers, and offering opportunities for the children and for women and for their families. And I know literally there are millions of Americans today that are awaiting a child, and I would strongly encourage even more Americans to consider adoption. And let me speak directly to those that might be considering abortion. There are alternatives. There are opportunities. There are caring Americans that would love to participate in adoption and would love to provide assistance. And I am also a proud co-sponsor of No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion, the leading abortion provider in the country. And these are really, Mr. Speaker, these are really stark statistics. In the last year available, Planned Parenthood of America in 2008, they committed, they slaughtered more than 324,000 little girls and little boys across this country. 324,008 abortions. They only participated in 2,405 adoptions. 324,000 abortions, less than 2,500 adoptions. There are other opportunities. There are other options. Adoption is the option. I would ask that we consider to defund an industry that is not concerned with the women, not concerned with the families. But let's turn our attention towards those across America that have given their hearts and homes to and open them up to our youngest members of society. With that, I yield back to the Congressman.
Thank you very much for your statement and for your emphasis on adoption, the alternative that is often forgotten, and it provides such a meaningful way of building a family. Thank you for that. I'd like to now yield to Marlin Stutzman, distinguished gentleman from Indiana.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleagues for bringing this very important issue to the House floor this evening, and appreciated all the other comments that have already been made. Having the opportunity to serve as the chairman in public policy back in Indiana, I do remember the time when my wife and I were expecting our second born, and when we were dealing with pro-life legislation in Indiana, and having the opportunity to go home and to see the ultrasounds of our second-born son was quite the experience. And I know that with the anniversary of Roe versus Wade coming up, this is an issue that is on a lot of hearts and minds of Americans across the country. And so today I rise that as we remember the 38th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, and but more importantly, the millions of innocent lives taken since 1973. In 2008 alone, there were over 1.2 million abortions. That is 3,315 innocent unborn children per day, 138 per hour, and about 2 every minute. While I have no doubt that future generations will place Roe versus Wade alongside the terrible Dred Scott decision, I know that there is much unfinished work before us. All of that work begins with a single inquiry. Mr. Speaker, a simple question forms the cornerstone of a national debate. When does human life begin? Without that answer, we are left with empty rhetoric and euphemisms. So I ask, when does human life begin? This question is not a lofty philosophical endeavor. Science has already given us the answer. Advances in molecular biology underscore the undeniable fact that life is present from the moment of fertilization, that life is fully human and infinitely valuable. Those who willfully ignore reality ought to remember the admonition of our second president, John Adams, that facts are stubborn things. Because a unique human life begins at the moment of fertilization, it is our solemn duty to defend the unborn, to speak up for the weak, to continue with firmness in the right. I proudly support House Resolution 212, the Sanctity of Human Life Act, which defines human life accordingly and affirms that each state has the authority to protect the lives of all human beings. We take up this charge because we are still dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. All possess the unalienable right to life. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
I thank you for your very fine statement and very strong commitment to the sanctity of human life. I'd like to now ask or yield to Anne Marie Burkle, who is both a nurse but also got her law degree, so she brings the both the law and the medicine side to this equation. So I yield to her.
Thank you. Thank you to the gentleman from New Jersey for yielding his time and for his unwavering support of life. Mr. Speaker, this coming Saturday marks the 38th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, a decision that fundamentally altered the moral landscape of America. For much of those 38 years, I have been very involved in the pro-life movement, both as an advocate for the unborn and a counselor of troubled women and teens, the unspoken second victims of abortion. As we reflect upon this sobering anniversary and the tremendous loss of life that it represents, I see reasons for hope. Attitudes are changing, and more young people are rejecting abortion as a choice for their lives. Technology has opened remarkable windows to the womb. So much of the early pro-life movement emerged from a frustration of the time. No one seemed to be listening, and we tried to get people to care. Now technology such as the 4D ultrasound imaging has aided us in our request to preserve life, showing women that their unborn is not a clump of cells, but a child that they can see rubbing her eyes or sucking his thumb. As we continue to fight for the unborn, we must not cede the ground we have lost. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act circumvents the Hyde Amendment by allowing government subsidies in Medicaid, federal employee health benefits, and international aid to be used to cover abortions. For over 30 years, the Democrats and Republicans have worked together each year to ensure that taxpayer dollars do not subsidize abortion. The Affordable Care Act represents a departure from that compact. Specifically, this law will allow $11 billion in taxpayer funds to be used for abortions in community health services. In addition to the federal subsidizing of abortions through the Affordable Care Act, I join other pro-life members of this Congress in expressing my concerns about the use of Skype technology to perform telemed abortions. Planned Parenthood of Iowa is dispensing the abortion-causing drug RU-486 through a teleconferencing system resulting in more than 1,900 abortions. Our forefathers understood that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Among these, the most fundamental right is the right to life. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady for her statement, for her leadership. You know, this class, and I think the American public really would appreciate this, of 87 members elected on this side of the aisle, overwhelmingly pro-life and more pro-life women than ever now sit as members of Congress. It is really very encouraging. I'd like to yield to my good friend and colleague from Illinois, Bob Shilley.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak during this special order, the subject of life. Today, I stand speak for those who can't speak for themselves. As a father of 10, life is a big issue at my house. After the presidential election, my daughter Rachel came to me and my wife and looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Hey, Daddy, who's going to protect the unborn children?" That was a big part of why I chose to run for Congress, along with all of the other things. Today, I was proud to become an original co-sponsor of the No Taxpayer Funds for Abortion Act. You know, when we look at the taxpayer funds that are going to be available for abortion, you know, even some of my pro-choice friends disagree with taxpayer funding of abortion. You know, this bill is very important. It makes permanent the Hyde Amendment, the Helms Amendment, the Dornan Amendment. You know, and one of the things, and one of my colleagues spoke about it a little bit, Tim, earlier, is you know, speaking about looking at adoption as an alternative to abortion. You know, a story that sticks in my mind today is I went to a crisis pregnancy center in Moline, Illinois, and these are folks who encounter crisis pregnancies. And the lady was telling me the story of a young lady who was going in for an abortion, and she thought she'd come to get a little bit more information. And they did a sonogram, and the baby was laying still. And it was down towards the end of the sonogram, and all of a sudden that baby just came to life and like put on a show for Mom. You know, and that brought a tear to my eye when I heard that story. And you know, when you look at life, without life we have nothing. And you know, a big reason that I am pro-life is that, you know, when we look at all of the doctors, all of the people who could invent something for this great nation, you know, I remember growing up, you know, and in 1973 when this became legal, it was considered a blob of tissue. Today we pull them out by their feet first, you know, to save the life of the mother when the mother's life is in danger. And you know, I just can't even imagine what transpires there, and sometimes don't want to. But you know, I believe as Americans we need to defend life to its fullest. I believe life begins at conception and it ends at our natural death. You know, just families and friends, and I've talked to people who have had abortion, the hurt that goes on through with women who have had abortions. You know, I think we need to focus in on educating folks and giving them that alternative. And maybe every Planned Parenthood out there should have to do sonograms, maybe even in a 3D series. But I really do appreciate an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and I really do thank the congressman here for putting this event together, and look forward to serving in the House of Representatives with him. Thank you.
Ms. Gilling, thank you very much for your great statement. And you know, your comment about your child saying, who will defend the baby. I remember a woman by the name of Jean Garten, who was with Lutherans for Life, and she was actually preparing a slideshow of actual abortions, which are hideous to behold, but it is a reality that has to be understood to know what abortion really is. And her young child walked in and said, "Mommy, who broke the baby?" Looking up at those shattered bodies of unborn children. So, you know, from the mouth of children, truth is spoken. I'd like to welcome back to the House, as we all do, Steve Pierce, a member from New Mexico, who we're just so glad to have you back.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey and appreciate his constant leadership in this issue of life. You know, our founding fathers told us that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were treasured values in this country. I think that it was no accident that they placed life at the beginning of that order. It's easy to believe that any society is judged for its quality based on its willingness to be a voice for those who are most fragile, those who have the least standing in that society. And in this society and all societies, none are with a quieter, less obvious voice than the unborn. So our willingness to stand up and support them is a reflection on the quality of this culture, and we need to do more Today in Santa Fe and elsewhere around the country, pro-life citizens joined in the march in a march for life. While my schedule for votes here today prevented me from being there, I'm happy to associate my voice with them tonight and in the months to come. Since Roe versus Wade was decided, over 50 million lives have been terminated through abortion. Great strides have been made legislatively. It's now wrong to take a minor across a state line. The partial birth abortion process has been banned. Some states have passed laws requiring a 24-hour waiting period, but much is left to be accomplished. Now, ultimately, the question comes up about when does life begin? The Supreme Court justices who decided the case actually expressed that concern themselves about when life began. But that was a discussion of decades ago. Science today leaves no doubt. The DNA is established on day one and never changes through the baby's life. The sonogram is evolving our nation's view on abortion as we speak. For many who have been educated in our universities, they believe life begins at birth. But the young who are looking at the sonograms and seeing that heartbeat within the first few days recognize that they can no longer believe that this is some mass of tissue with inconsequential matters at risk. And so this nation is beginning to become more pro-life day by day. And that's a blessing, because in the end, every society will be judged by its willingness to speak for those with no voice. Again, thank the gentleman from New Jersey, and I'm proud to add my voice to those who speak for the most fragile, the unborn. May God bless this country, and may God bless the mothers of this country. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce, thank you so very, very much. I'd like to yield to my good friend and colleague. You know, one of the things that we have in the Congress are a large number of medical doctors, OBGYNs, and others who are overwhelmingly pro-life. Dr. Rowe from Ohio is among us.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, as an obstetrician gynecologist, I've delivered close to 5,000 babies and strongly support the sanctity of life. Using technology like the 3D ultrasound has given us windows to the womb that show the unborn child as living, breathing, a feeling human being. I've looked through that window with my own eyes numerous times, and I've seen human development occur from the earliest stages of the tiniest embryo all the way through birth, which strengthens my conviction in the right to life. Life is a precious miracle from God that begins at conception. It's our responsibility and privilege as legislators to protect those who do not have a voice. I will always fight for the right to life, because it is my conviction that we are all unique creations of a God who knows us and loves us before we are even conceived. Tonight we mark one of the most tragic, misguided Supreme Court cases in our nation's history, Roe versus Wade. Since 1973, more than 50 million babies have been denied the right to life. We must make our laws consistent with our science and restore fully legal protections to all of those who are waiting to be born. If government has any legitimate function at all, it is to protect the most innocent among us. For over 30 years, Congress has prevented taxpayer-funded abortions. Unfortunately, this door has been reopened with the passage of Obamacare, the largest expansion since the pivotal Roe v. Wade decision. In response, House Republicans in the Pledge to America vow to repeal and replace this legislation. I look forward to working with my new colleagues to ensure this promise is kept. It is only by making good on this oath that we can expect to restore the trust that the American people have in their own government, and in doing so, ensure that the door to taxpayer-funded abortions remains closed. I want to congratulate the Hope Center in Greenville, Tennessee, who's sponsored by the First Free Will Baptist Ministries, who support life. These people do a wonderful job in ministering young mothers who may be single or married to preserve life. I'm glad to be here on the House floor tonight with my friend and other legislators fighting for the rights of the unborn. And I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey who literally is one of the leaders and heroes in the pro-life movement. I can't say enough about Congressman Smith and what he's done to promote this right to life across the country. And as I was walking over here toward the House floor tonight, I had some thoughts about children I deliver. And I have seen those children grow up in my hometown, Johnson City, Tennessee. And the beauty of it is you get to coach these young kids in Little League ball, and you get to watch them grow up and come to your home and graduate. And the people that I have seen have been young doctors and nurses and teachers and college athletes and newspaper writers and news directors. All of these young people I've delivered and seen grow up, and the world would not be a better place if they were not here. The world would be a much worse place. And think about how many thousands and tens of thousands and millions of the same people I just delivered that I watched grow up in my community that are not here today because of this terrible law. I do want to mention one thing medically that was brought up a moment ago about a third trimester abortion to save the mother's life. And let me make this as clear as any doctor can make anything. There is no medical indication whatsoever for a third trimester abortion, period. Let me say that one more time, and I will debate this anywhere with any doctor in the world. There is no medical indication on this earth for a third trimester abortion. I thank the gentleman. I'm encouraged about the degree that the American people are changing their minds, and I think if we keep working and talking and explaining and changing hearts, we'll change this terrible law. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
I thank my good friend for yielding and thank him for his leadership, again, and the expertise of being an OBGYN who has been there, knows better than almost all of us just how sacred and fragile the life is of an unborn child as well as his or her mother. I'd like to yield to Jim Langford from Oklahoma, and thank him for being here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for my colleague from New Jersey for hosting this time in the House chamber. And Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of one of the most basic functions of any government. 3,000 years ago, a mom taught her son, the king, how to be a wise ruler. We have those words written down in Proverbs 31, where she told him, "Speak for those who cannot speak for themselves." 235 years ago, our founders wrote A Despot King. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This truth, that all people have the right to life, is so obvious, so clear, that they called it self-evident. But in America, millions of people cannot pursue happiness, and they cannot appreciate liberty because their first God-given right was denied: life. In recent days, the discussion from the left has turned to reducing the numbers of abortions. I applaud this line of thinking because it admits one thing: abortion is wrong. It destroys a life, and it devastates the future of a mom. I ask, why should abortion be reduced if it's just another medical procedure to remove some unwanted tissue from a woman? If it's just tissue, what does it matter? No one is saying we need to reduce the number of skin moles being reduced or reduce the number of warts that are removed. That's unconscionable. Why? Because that we know that a wart is unwanted tissue, but a fetus, that's a baby. We can use any euphemism like fetus or dividing tissue or embryo or just simply inconvenience. But no one comes to a family and says, "How's the embryo?" No one says to a pregnant woman, or hears a pregnant woman say, "Excuse me, I just felt the fetus kick." No one comes to a baby shower and said, "Here's a gift for your inconvenience." Say what you want, split hairs all you want. We know that's a baby. Decades ago, we could not look into the womb and see the development of the child. People were told that the child in the womb was just like a chicken embryo. But now, with 3D ultrasound, we can look into the darkness of the womb and see a child kicking her feet, sucking her thumb. We can count her fingers and toes and watch their tiny heartbeat. At 20 weeks, we can look at the child inside and even say boy or girl. Why? Because it's a child, not just an embryo. The difference between an adult and a child in the womb is just time. And they're a person who must be given their most basic of all human rights, life. I strongly support defining life at conception. I strongly support adoptions. I strongly support crisis pregnancy centers and hope pregnancy centers that are doing such a great job all around the country and all around my district in Oklahoma. It is time to cut off federal funding for abortion. Why in America is it that taxes are mortified at the thought of abortion, that they are required to also give their tax money to fund abortions around the world? When a constituent comes to me and asks, why are my taxes so high? I have to tell them, partially because your government is spending some of your hard-earned money on abortion funding around the globe. Why it is in this chamber today we debated for hours if an infant should be guaranteed health care coverage, but yet some of the same individuals who demand insurance protection for that child find no issue killing that infant only moments earlier when it's in the womb. Earlier today, a clinic in Philadelphia was raided, where a physician was arrested for fully delivering infants 6, 7, 8 months into the pregnancy and then stabbing those children after they had been delivered with scissors. Today, this is the United States of America. This issue is not about oppressing women or denying choice. It's about protecting children and honoring the self-evident truth that everyone is endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, including and especially life. Almost 4 decades ago, individuals in this chamber laid the foundation for a court ruling that has stripped the womb of its glory and its majesty. For decades since, legislators in this chamber have protected bald eagle eggs, migrating insects, snail darters, and rare flowers, but we refuse to protect children. May God have mercy on our nation, and may we awaken one day to the horror of what abortion policies have done to our nation. We would rather protect our fundraising, our leadership, and our convenience than protect the unborn child. This is not a difficult choice. It is a clear choice, and we should choose life. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Langford, for your very powerful statement. And I'd like to now yield to my good friend and colleague from Georgia, a medical doctor as well, Dr. Paul Brown.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I believe the greatest moral issue we face as a nation is the killing of 4,000 unborn children every single day through abortion. Mr. Speaker, God cannot continue to bless America while we're killing these children. They're children, they're babies, they're human beings. When I came to Congress in 2007, the very first bill I introduced was my Sanctity of Human Life Act. I'm a medical doctor. I know without any question that life begins when the spermatozoa, the sperm cell, enters the cell wall of the oocyte, the egg, and produces a one-celled human being called a zygote. That zygote is totally different from its mom. It has every function, every bit of genetic makeup to be a grown human being if we just nurture it and allow it to grow and allow it to live. I've been involved with a crisis pregnancy center in Athens, Georgia. Not long ago, we had a young lady who was considering an abortion. She came there and she had an ultrasound. She was about 10 or 12 weeks along. I don't recall where, but early on in her pregnancy, she just found out a few weeks before that she had missed a period and came for a pregnancy test. When she saw that ultrasound, her exclamation was, "That's a baby!" And that's what we see over and over again with these moms, expectant moms, when they see those ultrasounds. That's the reason that she understood it was a baby. It is a baby. It's a human being. There's no greater freedom, no greater liberty than to live. There's no greater protection that we as a government can give to protect human beings all the way from the time of fertilization until they have natural death. You see, Mr. Speaker, God creates those children. We do not have the moral authority to take their lives. We've got to protect their lives. In a free society where liberty is held in the highest esteem by every individual in this country, whether Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, The right to life is a fundamental form of liberty. We have to protect life. That's the reason the first bill I introduce in every single Congress will continue to be my Sanctity of Human Life Act. My friend and fellow member from California, Duncan Hunter, Jr., has reintroduced his dad's bill, Duncan Hunter Sr.'s Sanctity of their bill is called the Life at Conception Act. I'm a co-sponsor, as he is Duncan Hunter the first and now the Duncan Hunter the second of my bill. We have to stop this travesty, this awful, horrendous attack, moral attack upon our basic rights as human beings, and that's the right to life. Mr. Speaker, if we cannot protect life, then we cannot protect any liberty. We cannot protect any freedom that our founding fathers created the Constitution to protect. Those God-given rights. We've had many of our colleagues tonight speak from the preamble that Thomas Jefferson penned in 1776 in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson is considered one of the least religious of our founding fathers. But he believed in life. That's the reason he penned it there. He believed in God. We're not taught that in schools anymore, but that's factual. And you see, even if you don't believe in God, from a scientific perspective, there's only one place in a person's life where you can draw the line between no life being there and life and human being and personhood being established. And that's at the time of fertilization. Roe versus Wade, in the decision, was predicated on there being no legislative definition of the beginning of life. That's the reason it's absolutely critical that we define life beginning at fertilization, to protect those one-cell human beings. It's absolutely critical that every person in this country who loves liberty, who wants to protect life, contact their congressmen, contact their senators, and say, we have to protect life. We have to protect all our God-given freedoms, particularly life. Contact your senator is what I tell my constituents, what I tell people all over this country. Contact your senator, contact your congressman. Tell them to support the Sanctity of Human Life Act, my bill, or Duncan Hunter's bill, the Life at Conception Act. Join in this fight, because there is no greater moral issue that this country faces. If we want God's blessings upon America, we have to protect these most vulnerable of human beings, the unborn children. In Proverbs, God says, speak up for the speechless and the cause of those appointed to die. That's what we're here tonight to do, is to speak up for those speechless, those appointed to die by abortion. We've got to end abortion. We don't need a constitutional amendment. We need a legislative definition, the beginning of life, to occur at fertilization. And once we have that placed into law, we will stop this blight upon our society, this dark era in the history of this nation that began in 1973 with this awful decision of the Supreme Court called Roe versus Wade. We have to protect life. We have to protect liberty. We have to protect every single human being's God-given rights. And protecting life is important, from fertilization all the way to natural death. And I promise that I will continue with every bit of my being, and many other of our colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, will continue to fight for life. So, Mr. Speaker, if we want God's blessings upon America to continue, we have to end this blight upon America. We have to define life beginning at fertilization and protect life of these. We have to define life beginning at fertilization and protect life of these unborn children. Thank you for Mr. Smith. And I want to personally thank you for your tireless fight in this issue, because you've been a stalwart here in this House for many, many years, and I greatly, personally appreciate the great work you've done for years and years in protecting life. So thank you, and God bless you. And we have to get this killing of these unborn children stopped so God can continue to bless America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Brown, thank you for your eloquence and your kind remarks. And I want to thank you for your leadership again as a medical doctor. I think you and Dr. Rowe and the other docs bring such a credibility. I hope Americans are listening. I hope my friends on the other side of the aisle who take the other side of this issue will begin listening. There needs to be a reevaluation. America needs to take a second look, a long and sustained look at the surface appeal arguments of the abortion rights side. Abortion is violence against children. It dismembers a child. It decapitates a child. It chemically poisons a child. And one of our earlier speakers talked about RU46 and how telemed abortions are being promoted by Planned Parenthood. RU46 actually operates in two ways. The first chemical starves the baby to death. So the child in utero, the child in the womb, simply cannot get nourishment to continue living. And the second chemical brings about the expulsion of that baby, who is usually dead but not always. If that isn't child abuse, if the other methods of abortion are not child abuse, I don't know what is. This idea that birth begins or life begins at birth belongs in another era, especially with ultrasound technologies available. As several of my colleagues have said, the window to the womb. As a matter of fact, it should be noted that even the leading pro-abortion activist in the 60s and early 70s, Dr. Bernard Nathanson from New York, one of the three co-founders of NARAL, which is one of the leading pro-abortion groups in the country, Dr. Nathanson said he presided over 60,000 deaths to children as he ran the largest abortion clinic in New York City. He went on to become a pro-lifer. And what caused that huge change of heart, both in his mind and in his heart? It was that he began doing blood transfusions and began to see that an unborn child is a patient just like any other patient who may be sick, have a disability, that early efforts and interventions could mitigate whatever that anomaly might be. And because of that, he said, how can I be in one room killing a baby with poison or dismemberment while in another doctor's office or in another operating theater providing this prenatal surgery? He saw the schizophrenia inherent in treating some children because they're wanted as being acceptable, and we welcome them, and if they're unwanted, they're throwaways. You know, the feminists had it right when they said no woman should ever be treated as an object. Well, we all know that the unborn child, if he or she is unwanted, is treated like an object and a throwaway, and no human life is a throwaway. Let me also say that Abby Johnson, who just recently, a little over a year ago, left a Planned Parenthood directorship in Texas, what caused her to change? She saw an ultrasound abortion in real time and said, I just saw the baby crumple right in front of my very eyes. And, you know, if that isn't a human rights abuse, I don't know what is either. So she became a pro-lifer and now speaks out very, very boldly. Finally, Dr. Alveda King, as I mentioned earlier, is Martin Luther King's niece. Dr. King had 2 abortions. She was a, quote, pro-choicer. She now is one of the most eloquent pro-life leaders in the United States and even in the world. She has said, how can the dream survive? Talking about her uncle's dream of inclusion, of human rights, of civil rights for all. How can the dream survive, she writes, if we murder the children? She goes on to talk about how the African-American population in this country is so disproportionately targeted by Planned Parenthood and others, and the number of abortions for African Americans are about 5 times the rate of Caucasians, and it is because of targeting, and there are other reasons, but that is one of the main reasons. That's where the Planned Parenthood clinics are, frankly. Abortion hurts women. She makes it so clear. She is eloquent in her defense, as are others in the ministries to women who have had abortions. One thing about this pro-life movement, and I've been in it for 38 years. I've been in Congress for 31 years. It loves them both. It says to both the mother and to the baby, we want to put our arms around you, we want to help, we want to be of assistance. And to any post-abortive woman, we're all about trying to help and to assist and provide some kind of pathway to reconciliation. And that's where the post-abortive women like Dr. Alveda King play such a crucial role in helping women who otherwise would feel so disenfranchised and left out. I want to thank our leadership, Speaker Boehner, our Majority Leader, Eric Cantor. We have a very pro-life leadership who recognizes how sacred life is, how this Congress, this House, needs to defend the defenseless. Tomorrow I will be joining the distinguished speaker as he speaks on the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. We will be having a press conference tomorrow, and we have over 125 co-sponsors. I have never seen a leadership so dedicated to protecting innocent human life as these individuals in our leadership. And I would hope my friends on the other side of the aisle would take a second long look at the carnage, the unbelievable pain and agony and suffering that abortion has visited upon women. It is not pro-women. Abortion exploits women. And it's certainly not pro-child either, because it decimates unborn children as well. So we have a great leadership. We have an excellent group of members, men and women, Democrats and Republicans, and I do hope that we will move this human rights issue forward. The young people are with us, and this is the greatest human rights struggle ever. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, for 27 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, allow me to claim the time, I do have a few things to set up, so I'll be right back. Mr. Speaker, let me thank the Speaker and for allowing and granting me the time. It is a pleasure to come in front of the American people. My name is Congressman Keith Ellison, and I want to talk a little bit about the Progressive Caucus tonight, the progressive message which we convey to the American people every week, and we want to come before the American people to talk about progressive values and the 83 members of the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus stands firmly in the position of supporting health care for all Americans. And therefore, we look at this repeal today, conducted by the majority, the Republican caucus, as quite an unfortunate event in our nation's history. They repealed health care reform bill, but the bill is not repealed. It's important for the American people to know that health care reform is being implemented, and it is the law, but in order to make a law into the law, you have to pass it through the House, the Senate, and then be signed for the President. This repeal that they did today stops here. It's not going anywhere. Really, it's political theater. But it is an important indication as to what they would do if they could. What they would do, and is something I'd like to describe right now, so the American people can get an idea of what Republican leadership and Republican expansion of their power would mean. First, let's talk about the deficit. You hear a lot about the deficit, and the deficit is important. The impact of repeal on the deficit is that it would increase the deficit by $230 billion this decade and $1 trillion the decade after that. When you listen, Mr. Speaker, to the speeches of the Republican caucus, and they say something about job-killing deficits, it's always important, Mr. Speaker, to turn your attention back to what the Republican caucus did today on the House floor, because it indicates how they really feel about expanding the deficit. They're okay with it. Impact of repeal on the deficit expands the deficit by $230 billion this decade and $1 trillion the next. What does this say about credibility? What does it say about real intention? What does it say about who was actually trying to lower the deficit? Health care reform is cost-effective and helps lower the deficit. Health care reform actually helps not only lower the national debt and deficit, but individual Americans' personal debt and deficit. We can never forget, Mr. Speaker, that 60% of all of the people who file for bankruptcy because of medical debt. A majority of the people filing for bankruptcy file for bankruptcy because of medical debt. This is an amazing statistic. We could talk about the national deficit. We can even talk about the national debt. But let's talk about family debt. Family debt being driven sky high because of medical debt. People going into bankruptcy because of medical debt. Now, with the health care bill, where we will have exchanges that will compete and have price and quality transparency for people so that they can evaluate a good product that is affordable. So when people who don't have the income can get a subsidy so they can go buy health care insurance. When we have all these important provisions in place, we're not going to see people going into personal bankruptcy because of medical debt. This is something the Republican caucus has not talked about, how Americans are drowning because of what the insurance industry has imposed upon them. It's important to say that today our Republican colleagues repealed health care reform. I hope, Mr. Speaker, the American people watch with interest where their particular member of Congress voted. Did the individual member of Congress, Mr. Speaker, vote to say, you know what, we're going to allow the insurance companies rescind your insurance policy if you get a breast cancer diagnosis? Because the Republican caucus's repeal today says that they want that to be able to happen. They want the insurance company to be able to say, you, ma'am, we found out you had breast cancer, your insurance is going to be rescinded. That's what they voted in favor of today by voting for repeal. Today they want to tell 25, 26, and 24-year-olds and their parents that, you know what, we're not going to let you be on your parents' health care insurance policy. You are on your own. Yeah, we know this is a tough market. Yeah, we know graduating from college or high school now is not easy because, you know what, there's not that many jobs out there. Unemployment is still very high. But you know what, too bad. You just got to figure out what you're going to do because you will not, we're going to take a benefit away from you that the Congress has already given to you, and we're going to snatch it out of your hand. This is what the repeal means. Today, seniors who can benefit from free preventive care, they're not going to be able to, the Republican caucus has indicated that that's not what they want. Now, they haven't taken it away because they haven't repealed the law. They'd like to by their repeal they passed through the House today, but the fact is that they're telling seniors, no, 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 you're going to have to pay a big cost in order to get some preventive care, which obviously will help low-income, will encourage low-income seniors not to seek that care, and then they, of course, will end up with being sicker, and it'll be more costly. But not only by repeal did they hurt seniors, did they hurt young people, they're telling small business people, you know what, those tax credits that we gave you, we're taking them back. Those tax credits that the Democratic caucus and the Democratic Congress and Senate and the Democratic President gave to you, us Republicans, we don't want you to have that, small business. We're going to snatch it out of your hand, even after you've made plans to actually take into consideration the tax credit that are available to you this year. So they're snatching benefits out of the hands of small business people, snatching benefits from young people who are post-high school and college, snatching benefits away from our seniors, snatching coverage away from people who can't afford it, thrusting people back into the arms of personal debt and throwing our whole economy back into the throes of national debt and deficits. This is what the Republicans would do if they could. Thank goodness they can't do it because the President and the Senate remain in Democratic hands. But if they could, Mr. Speaker, it's very clear what they would do. Now, the Democrats' top priority is not repealing anything. It's extending more rights, more protections for the American people, and then, of course, allowing the American people to make their own choice so they can be free. So you can be free as an American and not have to worry about health care because you have health care, because the government is protecting you from insurance companies who would throw you into the street, give you an overcost product, and would rescind you and deny you coverage. The Democrats' top priority would not be to monkey around with undermining health care. The Democratic priority would be to create jobs and putting America back to work. That is what Democrats are working on right now, Mr. Speaker, and would work on even more so if we had the majority. Today, the Republican majority, they have other priorities other than jobs. Their job, as they've already revealed today on the House floor, is to repeal patients' rights, to put insurance companies back in charge, and to explode the deficit, as I already indicated with this particular graphic. The Republican priority is to look out and protect insurance companies. The Republican priority is to make sure that insurance companies have what they need. And the insurance companies spent $14 million a day to try to defeat health care after they, in fact, were defeated and we passed health care. That we're quite confident that they did not just take that defeat lying down. Here they are back again with the wholly owned subsidiary known as the Republican Caucus trying to do the bidding of the insurance industry once again. The patient's rights repeal aims to take away new health care freedoms that take us back to a system that favoring the insurance industry. The patient's rights repeal bill takes away something that people have already expected to get and takes us back to a system in which the insurance industry is in control. Children with pre-existing conditions are denied coverage in the bad old days. Young people age 26 can't stay on their parents' plans in the bad old days. Pregnant women and breast and prostate cancer patients will be thrown off insurance rolls in the bad old days. Seniors pay more for their drugs. As a matter of fact, in the new health care bill, we're filling in the donut hole, which is something apparently the Republican caucus doesn't like because they want to dig out the donut hole so seniors can fall back into that donut hole. And, of course, we already talked about exploding the deficit and making small businesses pay higher taxes. Why would the Republicans want to do that? It seems so unfair, but that is exactly what they did today. Republicans are focused on repealing health care reform instead of making jobs, and making jobs is what they should be putting their time and energy into. Their agenda for America is not health care, it's no care. It's status quo care. No care if you lose your job. No care if you or your child have a pre-existing condition. No care if you're a senior in the donut hole. That's what the Republican caucus has in mind for you and your family. No care if you're under 26 on your parents' plan. No care if you get sick and your insurer drops your coverage. No care if your insurer hikes your premiums higher than you can afford. You're just out of luck with no care. Now, the Congressional Budget Office does carefully show that the repeal of the Patients Protection and Affordable Care Act would add $230 billion to the deficit in the first 10 years and $1 trillion after that into the future. And the American Medical Association has recognized this problem. What they have said is the AMA does not support initiatives to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Who is the AMA? the American Medical Association. Who's that? That's America's doctors. They know how dangerous it is to repeal health care. They know because they are in the healing arts. Now, the insurance companies, many of them are in the money-making arts, so they got a different take on this thing. But the American Medical Association has come together and say that they do not support initiatives to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Expanding health care coverage, insurance market reforms, administrative simplifications, and initiatives to promote wellness and prevention are key to the new law that reflect the AMA priorities. So the people who do healing actually heal people. Let me tell you, no insurance company bureaucrat ever healed anybody. All they do is deny coverage to people and process claims. But the folks who actually bring healing, the docs, the people who the AMA represents, they are against repeal, as the Democratic caucus is against repeal. And it's so unfortunate that we had to sit here today and witness the House effort to repeal health care reform. They didn't do it. They're not going to do it. They're going to fail. This is all political theater. This is all showing off. It's all just, you know, political theater. But the truth is that it does indicate what they would do if they could, and we are bound and determined to stop them, to protect the American people, and to make sure that we have those important health care reforms in place that are going to make sure that Americans continue to go to the doctor, to get preventative care, to fill in the donut hole, to offer coverage to people until they're age 26. As I said before, you know, I was privileged earlier this week to meet two little girls. They were suffering from leukemia. And these little girls, brave as they were, said, you know, look, if we didn't have the Affordable Care Act, we would be denied, or could well be denied, health care coverage. These two little girls' father, who had to take family medical leave in order to help meet all of the medical needs of the family, as well as they had other children who didn't have those medical needs, that family ended up going into bankruptcy because of the piles of debt that were thrown on their shoulders. And so the Affordable Care Act comes to address these problems, yet the repeal comes to heap those problems back on those families. And it's too bad that it happened. They're not going to succeed, but it's very clear that by their repeal vote today, what they would do if they could. Now, the AARP, which represents our American seniors, they weighed in on this debate, and what AARP has said is as the House prepares to vote this week on repeal of the Affordable Care Act, I am writing to make clear AARP's position. While we respect that there are those who do not support the Affordable Care Act, AARP opposes repeal because the new law includes many vital provisions important to older Americans and their children. So there again, not only do the organization that represents America's doctors say no to repeal, the American Medical Association, but AARP, which represents America's seniors, says no. And of course they should, because America's seniors need health care reform, the reforms that are in the Affordable Care Act. For example, seniors under the Affordable Care Act, we're filling in the donut hole, making prescription drugs affordable for our seniors. We have a wellness visit for every senior in America once a year to make sure our seniors are healthy. Wellness visits, dealing with prescription drugs, free preventative care means we have healthier seniors. Healthier seniors are happier seniors because they got enough money, and they got more money than they would if we were under the reign of the insurance companies as we were before. And so AARP is doing what they're supposed to do, representing the best interests of America's seniors. The Heart Association. This is an association that deals with the functioning of the human heart, a vital organ in the human body, and this Heart Association comes to make sure that our hearts are protected. The Heart Association has this to say about this repeal debate. Patients have already benefited from the reforms that have been implemented in the last 10 months. And by the way, the Republican caucus didn't even give the Affordable Care Act a chance. 10 months after we pass it, they're trying to get rid of it. They're not even waiting to see where it can be fine-tuned here and there. They just want to get rid of it all. Now, that's not a good faith approach to this debate. Some of them even came to the floor and said there are certain things about the bill they like. But they don't want to tweak the bill. They don't want to fine-tune the bill. They just want to repeal it. And you know, so that to me indicates another key indicator of where the Republican caucus's mind is at with regard to Americans and health care. But as I was saying about the Heart Association, patients have already benefited from the reforms that have been implemented in the last 10 months. We believe these reforms and additional forthcoming patient protection provisions were long overdue. So the Heart Association says, hey, we didn't get this Affordable Care Act passed fast enough. That's their position. Long overdue and need to be given an opportunity to work. Absolutely, they are right. If necessary, improved. And of course, nobody on the Democratic caucus side says this bill was perfect. There's never been a perfect bill. Never been a perfect bill. But the Republicans don't want to say, look, let's get our heads together and make the bill stronger. They say repeal. And I voted no and was very proud to do so. Back to the Heart Association. Repeal of the Affordable Care Act will have devastating consequences for patients and their families. That's according to the Heart Association, an association dedicated to the wellness of people's hearts, people who focus their time, attention, and resources on good heart health are opposed to repeal, as they should, because they have good intentions and are operating in good faith. Of course, only 18% of Americans support full repeal, according to the latest Washington ABC News poll. Only 18%. These are probably the folks who still believe the bill has death panels in it, which it never did. That was never true. Massive misinformation and disinformation around the Affordable Care Act. But only 18% support full repeal, and the fact is that I would imagine that if you were able to sit those 18% of Americans in a room and really tell them what the bill did, they probably would be significantly lower than that. Of course, there was another AP poll that said 26% support full repeal, still a significant small number. And so the bottom line is that whether you talk about your average family, the Heart Association, AARP, American Medical Association, and many others, this repeal bill that passed through today, but doesn't repeal the law. Make sure, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that. It was a low point in this Congress, and I look forward to a day when we can return to a Congress that says we believe that American people have the right to be healthy, right to be strong, right to go to the doctor, right to seek out preventative care, right to have insurance companies be accountable, right to make sure insurance companies don't just throw people off coverage when they need it most. And I look forward to a day when that happens, Mr. Speaker, because on that day, Americans will be in a much, much better place than we are today with the majority in the House that doesn't feel that the insurance companies need reform or accountability. Now, I just want to talk a little bit because some people mistakenly believe that somehow members of the Republican caucus are more pro-business than the Democratic caucus. That's not true, never been true, and we prove again and again that it's not true. But they say that stuff, and some people believe it. So let me just share with you some personal stories about people who are looking at this issue from the perspective of small business. Because despite the Republicans' rhetoric about the Affordable Care Act, business and business groups across the country are speaking out against the Republican efforts to repeal health care reform. And, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to be the one that goes not to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce because they're a little different, but to those local chambers of commerce, Rotaries, all across this country. I wouldn't want to be the one to go to them and say, you know those tax credits the Democrats got for you for health care? We're taking them away from you. I wouldn't want to be that representative on that day, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, Helen Darling, who's the president of the National Business Group on Health and a former Republican Senate staffer, said about business executives who call for repeal, she said, quote, if they really understood it, they wouldn't. I don't think we'll get a better solution in the U.S. in our lifetime. If it gets repealed or gutted, we'll have to start over and we'll be worse off. This is what Helen Darling, president of the National Business Group, says about the bill. She says that small business people will suffer because of it. Now, if you're a small business person and you can get a tax credit to help you with 30 to 50% of the cost of health care, you go get that. That means you may save the money that you need to invest in your small business, maybe hire some more people. That's why when the Republicans were calling the health care bill a job-killing bill, all of us looked at each other and said, what bill are they talking about? The fact is that the Affordable Care Act is a bill that is a job-enhancing bill. This is a pro-job bill. This is a job that trains people to go into the health care professions, that helps small business so they can hire more people. And Helen Darling knows that. And she ought to know because she is the president of the National Business Group on Health. The Small Business Majorities, which is an organization dedicated to supporting small business, their letter to lawmakers characterizes the repeal bill as, quote, an affront to our nation's small business community. Well, of course it is. If you're a small business person trying to add another employee, trying to buy some new equipment, trying to and do it all while offering health care to your employees in your business, maybe you got 3, 4, maybe you got 25, 30 employees, of course it's an affront to you if the House Majority Caucus, the Republicans, want to take away your tax credit. Absolutely, that's an affront. If you're trying to make it, imagine yourself working for some company for years. You say, you know what, I don't want a boss, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm starting my own company, and you know what, I'm only going to have 1 or 2, maybe 3, 4 people with me when I get started, but we're going to make a go of it. And you know what, you guys, human beings get sick sometimes, so we got to have health care. And then the Democrats come and say, we're going to help you pay for that health care. And then the Republicans say, no, we're not, and they snatch it away. Of course that's an affront to our nation's small business community. The small business majorities is absolutely right in their letter. The tax credits and health insurance exchanges in the Affordable Care Act will help, quote, drive down the cost and offer small business owners more choices, more freedom when purchasing insurance, which will in turn allow them to, quote, spend less on insurance premiums and more on growing their business and creating jobs. Now, the caucus that claims to be about jobs and the deficit actually is operating directly opposite to both the deficit and jobs. That means that we got to read the fine print. We can't just go by what people say, because people sometimes say anything, Mr. Speaker. The Small Business Majority is recently released results of a November 2010 survey of 619 small business owners. In their survey, the key findings highlight that, quote, 1/3 of employers who don't offer health insurance said they would be more likely to do so because of the small business tax credits. So there again, the small business tax credits in this bill designed to help small businesses take care of their employees and meet their bottom line and hopefully turn a profit so that they can help grow our community. So I'll yield back my time now, Mr. Speaker. It's been a pleasure talking about the danger of repeal and the importance of the Affordable Care Act.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy